It's episode 17 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. Special guest Rob Tarr. We're going to be unpacking live decision-making under pressure. How do you help an athlete in the highest pressure situations to think for themselves, make their own decisions, and know they've got the backing of their head coach? Rob is a coach developer and coach from World Wheelchair Rugby. That's going to be a mouth thingler as we go on in this podcast, but we'll do our best. So welcome, Rob. Thanks very much for joining us.
Our pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you.
Well, we touched on that theme already of live decision-making under pressure. Can I kick us off? Can you define that for us, or tell us what that means to you in your context?
Well, obviously, live decision-making, our game is an invasion sport, wheelchair rugby. There's a lot going off on the ball and off the ball. And obviously, when you're a coach on the sideline, you've got to trust that your players on the court are going to make them the right decisions. So all my live decision-making is done through practice. So when we do practice sessions with our athletes, we try to create them decisions by putting the players under maximum pressure. So that's basically the way I coach my players. I always put constraints on games. Obviously, communication is a very, very big element of the sport. So getting them to speak, talking to one another, and being aware of, as I said before, there's so many things happening on the court that the players got to be aware of everything that's happening on the court. And when I worked with Mark, we did a lot on scanning, and that scanning is a major thing that I always bring into when I work with coaches and athletes.
Can you expand on putting your athletes under pressure in that practice situation? Can you give me some geeky and practical examples of how you do that?
Right. So when we play a game, we always put constraints on a game. So either we take seconds off the clock, or we'll put players in awkward positions. Obviously our sidelines, we call them danger zones. So if you put a player in a danger zone, it maximizes the pressure. I'll do things like never know. Normally, when we score a try, then the ball always comes in from the baseline. But I'll have balls lined up all around the court, and the player will never know where the ball's going to come in. So that increases their transition. So it's all about thinking the ways of taking the player out of their comfort zone and challenging him to think and make quick decisions, because obviously when they play major tournaments, that's what they've got to do. Once the ball's live, they've got to be making these important decisions.
How much coaching can you do in action during these games, during the tournaments? How many timeouts do you get? How many interventions are you allowed? Is it a high intervention sport, or is it you need to let them get on with it?
Well, we had a big change this year because we used to have players' timeouts, and that's been taken away now. So that get out of jail free card is gone. So now the coach only has 2 timeouts per quarter, and you can't carry them timeouts across. So it does make it more challenging. So when you do use your timeouts, and they've got to be very precious and get as much information to the players as possible during them timeouts.
How many minutes is a quarter, Rob?
So it's 8 minutes per quarter with the stop clock.
Okay, so we're talking already about constraints, using constraints to put athletes under pressure, time pressure, position pressure, location pressure, not allowing them into specific locations. You've touched on scanning. How do you apply the concept of scanning in your coaching?
Well, again, it's something that we did with Mark when I was one of the GB coaches. We would video sessions and then do one-to-ones with the players and put a still on the screen and let them look at the still for, say, 5-10 seconds, and then take that still away and then ask questions. What did they see in that still? Obviously, we've got lots of threats on the court. We've got players who are very, very functional, who can steal balls very easily. So they need to be really aware of all them threats that are on the court when they're putting the ball in. So we concentrate quite a lot from the inbounder because that's the first time, you know, the ball is actually coming into play. So that inbound has got to be very, very careful where the ball comes in and be aware of all them threats and them safe places where to put the ball in. So that's where the first start of the scanning starts.
If I can add a bit of context for you, Simon, and the listeners, obviously when Rob, the coaching team, and myself started to link up, it was during the lockdown period building up to the major championships. Was it Tokyo?
Yeah, it's Tokyo Paralympics.
Yeah, so building up to the Tokyo, and so they didn't have the freedom of the amount of time on live court. So it was finding a way to recognize, because I think what's really interesting with it, if no one's seen wheelchair rugby, go and get on YouTube, have a look at the intensity, the impact, but the amount of work going on off ball. And I think this is the key bit. So when we linked up, is one of the things we really wanted to enhance is that composure under pressure in those critical moments, whether it's the end of one of those quarters or the last quarter where some of the bigger teams may have run away a little bit under the big competitions, is how can we get people to have a bit more composure? So could we get them more effective at scanning early off ball, but know what to look for? So instead of having to do quick reactional stuff, which still has to happen, they've collected some data to allow them to understand where they are and the options they have a little bit quicker. So Rob and the team, when we have discussions, we're looking at strategies. I mean, a constraint we had was we couldn't see the players as much as we wanted to. So it was kind of, okay, so how could we use the video? So they were really being smart at getting them in little groups and one-to-ones on Zoom and just running a live video, then sometimes freezing it, putting a picture up, taking it away, blanking the score and go, okay, what are you recording? Where is everyone? Off and off ball, teammates, opposition space, then them having to share it, draw it, and then the screen went back up. Okay, so how accurate are we? And then what options have we identified? And really getting the athletes to think through, based on where people are, where do you think the next move is going to come from? Where do you think the adaptations are going to be? And I think the coaching team did a phenomenal job at that during that lockdown.
Yeah, it was obviously a very interesting time because normally before a Paralympic Games, you'll go to all over the world playing against them teams in preparation. So everybody has a good idea what you're going to be up against. But before Tokyo, obviously we went into lockdown, so it was very interesting because none of the teams knew what was happening in the different countries. And as I say, in many ways, I think it worked to our advantage because we'd already started looking at this new process. So we spent a lot of time working as a team and in groups and individuals, chatting about the analysis and how we break the play down and everything. And when the games actually come over, I mean that's when we've seen all the hard work paid off. I mean, first time we'd ever won a gold medal in history.
Wow.
And it wasn't that the first medal of any colour, Rob?
Yes, yeah, first medal of any colour in the Paralympic event. Yeah.
So what were the keys to the performance then? Why the turnaround?
Well, I think, as I say, we motivated the players, and they understood what I think the good thing is that obviously we did game plans, but we involved all the players within the game plans. Where before coaches always just used to put the game plans out and expect the athletes to go out there and do what we wanted. Now we're working along with the athletes. We're getting feedback from the athletes, and they're putting into the game plan. So they've got that buy-in. So when we went out there, it wasn't just the coaches' ideas; it was everybody's ideas. It was a full team that worked together. Another strange thing that happened is just before Tokyo, I caught COVID and couldn't actually travel with the team. But what they did is they put a live link for me, so I was able to chat with the coaches who was in Tokyo, and I was watching it on the live screen, and that also worked very well because I was taken away from all the hype, and I could watch what was happening quite neutrally on the screen and feed that back to the coaches on the sideline, and recognise what lineups was working well, what plays was working well, and turn the negative to a positive, and I just missed out on seeing the medals go over the necks.
Yeah.
I think, Rob, another element be worth Simon diving into, I'll just throw the trigger in then step back, is one of the things I know you discussed with me early on is that when it's tight games against the big teams, it was that composure in those minutes in that decision making. Keep making the smart choices. Don't allow them to shoot away with those scores near the end. And watching it, I know when you went back into live practice, those odd sessions, the quality of the dialogue between player and player and player and the coach was really meaningful in your timeout. You could really see that connection of, okay, so where's the solution? What are our options? And you always using that language to put it back on the athletes. And then you could see them starting to, and I think it was through all your hard work through the Zoom stuff, to see them thinking a bit smarter about options early and then being solution-based live as opposed to problem-based, that language. Do you want to share a bit about that, Rob, that transition and the challenges you had against the top teams before in those last quarters or the last minutes?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I mean, obviously we beat the USA for the gold medal, and they beat us earlier on in the pool, and it was the one team. USA have always been a very, very strong team to beat, so that was a big challenge for us. We worked on a rule of three where, as I say, if the athlete was having problems, then rather than come to the coach, he would talk to his peers. And then if the peers couldn't answer the question, then they would come to the coach. And ultimately, that's how gameplay works, because all them players are on the court together. So when they used to come for a timeout, rather than us give information, we would say to the player, right, what do you need from your teammate, and get that conversation going. And if the conversation, if there wasn't coming up with the answer, then we would feed in the answer. But as I say, I think it all helped the development of making decisions. And many people ask, what makes a great player? Is it speed? Is it strength? And the reality is it's the ones who make the best decisions on court. I think that's in any sport. So I think that's what won us that gold medal. Our players all played, to the best they could play on the day, and they all made very smart decisions.
So if you're trying to improve composure and late game performance and trying to implement the rule of three at the same time, what happens in those situations? Did you find coaches sometimes ignoring the rule of three and taking control and going into fixing or telling mode at the end of games? I'm not implying that's a bad thing, by the way, because maybe that's what the athletes needed. But how did the coaches really strike that balance? How did they know when to apply rule one of the rule of three and when to shortcut that and give the athletes the information they needed in that crucial moment?
Well, again, all athletes are different, and it's understanding the characters that you're coaching. I mean, some players do like to be told exactly what to do, and you give them a specific role on the court, and then they go out and do it. So I suppose, obviously, throughout a cycle, a 4-year cycle, or whichever competition you're going to, you're spending a lot of time with them athletes, and you do get to know them. I always make a point of getting to know my athletes on and off the court, and then you know what they need from you, and then you give it to them. Another thing that we also went into, we called it blue head and red head, where when you see you've probably heard of this one, but obviously you see athletes going into that emotional mode and panicking, and then we would just shout in blue head, and that was a trigger word. If you go into blue head, that's your logistic computer side of your brain. So yeah, using them little trigger words, and the coaches was doing the same on the court. I mean, obviously we was getting stressed at moments when we was going goals down, and we had to say to each other, blue head guys, keep it together. So that's how we were. Yeah, obviously, whatever we told the athletes, we had to take on the same responsibilities and go through the same process as a coach.
That blue head, red head, I implemented that with one of my teams quite a few years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And we had one player who struggled with emotional control, especially under pressure. And that concept of blue head, red head drove him nuts. If I said to him in a timeout, hey, you're a redhead, or you're looking a little red just now, he'd just it was like red, pardon the pun, but it was red flag to a bull to him. So now maybe there was something about the way I introduced it, or he perhaps interpreted it as criticism, or maybe he was thinking, I know I'm in that zone. I don't need my coach to tell me that. But that backfired on that. Nothing wrong with the concept. But for me, maybe it was the way I executed it. It completely backfired for that one individual athlete who was the person who needed the concept the most.
I wonder part of that is texture of all the prep work, and I'm not saying you didn't do any, Simon, with this player in particular.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I'm not as experienced as I am now.
Because if you think about it early on, especially if you're nailing in that rule of three, if you're doing that pressure loading, what you're doing as a coach is you're scanning in practice where the edges, where's the envelope where they started to go into red, the green into yellow now. One, getting them to recognise before they're in red, where are they, and what's the source of the issue? Is it you're getting caught up in the referee decision? Is it you're getting caught up in not knowing the solution now? Is it you're getting caught up because your teammates aren't listening to you? Whatever it is, finding it in practice then and go, right, when you're recognising what the problem is, have you got an action for a solution then? And do your teammates recognise it and they got? So all of a sudden then it's a solution-based, well, what do we need to focus on to get us back, as opposed to, oh, I'm in this, I need to get back out, because some people just can't get back out. And I think where Rob and the team did with it, and its personalities, I think, they had a cycle of players that they've been, a lot were there for quite a while, weren't they, Rob, up to that cycle. So they knew each other, but I think what the team did, they unlocked more ownership and more being aware of each other live on court, not waiting for the timeout to fix things. Is how can we, and I think as you said there, Rob, and it may be texture go into it, is what is effective communication? What words do we need to say now that's going to have the right impact? Do you know your role on and off ball? What's that going to look like? Right now, let's go for it without stopping for long chats. Put a time limit on a timeout. That we're not going to talk a lot now. Can we fix it live? And I think that's drove that communication, which may have helped people understand what the solution is in the moment, because they weren't going, I'm not being listened to, or I don't understand what I'm meant to do now, because they really delve down on individual roles and how players communicate without the need for the coach stepping in. Would that be fair, Rob, in that texture?
Yeah, I think the thing is, though, everything that we did, we recognised that we needed to build a culture. And obviously, you hear these people say, you want to build a culture. You think, well, where do you start with something like this? But the reality is, we all sat in a room, and basically everything that we agreed upon, the whole team agreed upon it. So I think once the fact that we sat in a room, we had these conversations, and everybody was happy with it, then everybody's accountable then, because we've all made that agreement together. It's almost like signing a contract. So I think that's why it worked, because everything that we spoke to our players about, as you say, if they didn't like being flagged for losing the temper or things like that, they'd been in a room and they'd agreed on it with the teammates and the coaches. So you could sort of hold them accountable then. Now,
Simon, please delve into it if you feel appropriate. But I think the difference that you guys did, and I see other successful teams do it. I don't mean success is winning medals. You might not win medals, but you're still getting the best out of the team. Is that point of whatever you agreed in that room, you eliminated the grey, you made sure everyone was involved. But the important thing was when you left the room, you all honoured it. You challenged each other. It wasn't just the chat. It was, okay, well, let's do it now. And I think there was a lot of emphasis on that, wasn't there?
Yeah.
What were the details there, Rob? So can you give us some examples of, it could be from that team in Tokyo or other teams you've been a part of. Well, if there was a 10-point agreement, a social contract, give us an example of what would be a couple of those points.
Well, going back to the team in Tokyo, because obviously that was a very big part in my life. We made a canvas. So basically, we had all the players, and we said to the players, right, how do you want to be perceived? Who are you? Who are you? And, there's talking about resilience and trust that bonded them together. So they all come up with these big words. and then we narrowed it down and we put it onto a canvas and we made stickers and basically, that was either on the back of the phone or went into the changing room. So it was constantly them things that we agreed upon. There was always out in the open and being constantly reminded of the things that we agreed upon. So yeah, we built canvas, and after Tokyo, a lot of the players and the coaches, obviously, they left. And for the next team that come along, then it's up to them to build their own canvas. So say everybody that you work with, you've got to find out what bonds that team together, and then get them to work on their own canvas. And then just keep reminding them.
Can I switch gears a little bit, take us back to a couple of things you guys said a few minutes ago? We were talking about scanning. Mark was referring to the amount of off-ball work that needs to be done. How do you put combinations of capabilities together in a wheelchair rugby team? Do you need a lot of generalists who can all do all the skills, or do you have specialists? And how do you take us into like the selection process around those combinations, but then also not just the technicalities of their skills, etc., but how they apply concepts like the rule of three under pressure? How do they enable the performance of others? Like, it must be quite a complex selection decision or allocation of court time of how to put those combinations together. How do you do that well?
Rob, do you want to add, just for the viewers, is the point constraint of capability of player as well within your challenge, an additional challenge?
Yeah, but obviously, disability sport is very unique, that we all have classification. And in wheelchair rugby, took for viewers, it did start off called murder ball back in the early 70s, and it was invented basically for tetraplegics, people who got disability in all four limbs, who couldn't compete in a team sport. We couldn't compete in basketball. So we invented this game called murder ball, and it's an invasion game, just getting the ball across the touchline. And then it grew in Canada, and then into North America, and then obviously then across the world. And then when I went to the Paralympics in Atlanta, it was called wheelchair rugby. So that was the development of the sport. So we have different classifications. It starts from 0.5, which is your least functional player, and it goes to 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and it finishes at 3.5. That's your most functional player. So you're only allowed 8 points on court. So it's like playing a game of poker. It's getting the right combinations to play together. You can either get a balanced team, say a 4-2s, or we play high-low teams, which is like 2 3.5s and 2.5s. So it's very much getting these players, how they work together. So if you've got two very functional players on court, you've got two least functional players, but everybody's got to be working together. I mean, as you say, when you watch a game, you might see these high pointers who are always scoring the goals, but you don't realise off the court, you've got your low pointers doing all the blocking. For me, it's very much like American football, where you've got you've got a quarterback and a receiver, but off that, you've got your blockers in the background. So yeah, we've as a coach, we've got all these different players with different disabilities and different classifications, and it's finding the right lineups that work together on the court. And then when the team brings on a lineup, then you've got to figure out what lineup you've got you can put on the court to balance that out. So it's very, very tactical. You're a lot to think about.
I think people listening, any evasion game that's just a traditional basketball, netball, football, rugby, etc., I think they can really, to get in front of someone like Rob and someone that understands classification, how to put capability combinations together with those constraints of getting people, okay, I need to know, they need to work together, but I need to know how they can work together, but also the adaptations with the opposition. really brings alive that capability combination at a different level that I think people can really understand and then take back into their sports, because you can't get that wrong. I mean, it's so obvious if you get it wrong, whereas I think in some sports they're not even thinking about it. It's like, oh, let's just put someone else in because they're quite strong or fast, and you're just thinking, well, yeah, but how do they fit with the others on the pitch or on the court? And I think that they could really learn from sports like Rob's sport, where they're really having to think like a master. What's the board game? Not drafts, the other one.
Chess.
Chess, that's the one. Yes. Yeah,
I take it you're not a chess player.
I'm just coming back from a cold. My brain's not all fine. But that point of one, having to think ahead, but then having to really make smart choices and adaptation, and know you need to practice those combinations in practice under pressure to know they work, but also to get players to understand each other and to understand what they can and can't do in passing, receiving, moving.
And they all use different equipment as well. So, we've got two different chairs. We've got an offensive chair, which has got like wings where they can drive through gaps. And then the lower pointers use a defensive chair. It's got like a big grid at the front for blocking and hooking. So, yeah, again, it's getting the right player using the right equipment. And then obviously we've got gloves and strapping. So there's so many things that you have to take on board. And I mean, I'm in a wheelchair myself. I've played the sport, so I've got a good understanding of wheelchairs and how people need to sit in them chairs to get the most performance from the physicality and disability. So lots to take on board in disability sport adaptations.
Rob, how do you audit that in? Okay, so you're preparing for a major competition. You've now worked out the squad that you've got. How do you in practice say, right, okay, so I'm going to throw this combination out against this combination? How do you judge of, okay, I need a bit more intervention work with these 2 or 3 players. Okay, now I'm going to switch this person out and this person in. So by the time you get to the competition, one, they know each other, but also all your combinations that provide something in a tactical advantage. How do you do that in practice of that?
Well, as I say, you've got we always have a long squad. We have different classifications playing with one another. I know in every sport now, female participation is a big element of the sport. Well, in our sport, we used to have female players play an additional. You could put an additional 0.5 on your thing. So instead of playing 8 points, you could play 8.5. This year we put a 4 point for women 2 and above. So again, it's getting the most from your bench, getting as much function on the court as possible. So it's understanding the classification and who can work together and getting them on court. So yeah, in practice, we play lots of different combinations and then sit back and see what works the best through video analysis.
So, Rob, coming back to our theme around helping athletes to make decisions under pressure in live situations, can you tell us some failure stories or just what you've learned over the years? What hasn't worked? Either in your own coaching or in observations of other coaches, and then how has that changed over time? Because I'd imagine in wheelchair rugby, there's quite a lot of different coaching experiences. So originated in America, so a lot of American football coaching backgrounds, maybe quite technical, quite directive. But then coming to the UK, you might have a lot of rugby, running rugby backgrounds, which might be better at coaching the decision-making aspects. Talk me through, there must be quite a wide range of coaching styles, and how have those coaching styles changed over time?
If you look at the sport across the pond, it's much more physical. I think in Europe we play more of a clinical game. They are much more smashing into one another. We tend to play a bit more clinical. I think that's just how Europe of sort of growing together, because at the end of the day, we all play the same style of rugby. It's just who plays it the best. Whenever I whenever I take a team before competition, I always set up a WhatsApp group, and that's for me. That's straight away the first way of getting your players to start communicating with one another. Then I start sticking on clips and things like that, and getting the people on the WhatsApp group, talking to one another, talking about the clips, problem solving, and things like that. So that's how I start my athletes, with that technical mind, by getting them to analyze and discuss it together. And then when we go into live play, hopefully they've already learned, and by experiencing them discussions and taking it on to court, I think that works well. As I say, yes, there are different styles around the world, but different lines, as I've talked about before, match up to them styles of play. So if you've got when we tend to play the Americans or the Canadians, because they're big hitters, that's when we bring our 3-5s onto the court, because they bring the intensity up a lot more. Where then if you want to bring the tempo down, we bring on a more balanced team and they pass the ball around. So using the right lines, you can change the tempo of the game.
Question for you, Rob, on obviously your main job now is coach developer. Are they already qualified coaches, or are you taking people that aren't yet qualified, or is it a mix?
Yeah, an absolute mix. I work with players in South America who don't know anything about the game, and then I've just back from South Korea who actually work with their national squad. So yeah.
So question on the coaching, Rob, is if you just strip it back, because I know there's so many nuances to great coaching, but where would be the element where you're going in and starting to look at this coaching? Where are you saying, I really need to get across that actually there are more ways than just telling a player what they did wrong and what to do right? How, you'll spot the trends. Where are the main things you really, when you start coaching somebody, to get them to really think about, is there a bigger light and shade as opposed to just shouting and telling and instructing? Where's the nuances where you say, I really need to get this across early to get them to think about how they communicate with their athletes?
Yeah, it's really is getting to know the athletes. As I say, I always encourage the coaches. You need to be people persons. You need to get to know them individuals, and what makes them click. They're all very different. So when I've gone to different countries and worked with coaches, I always get them to, a bit like what we're saying about the WhatsApp group, setting up a platform where they can get to know one another and do some individual work as well, because you can't just work with the team all the time. You really need to take individuals to one side. And obviously, if you've got a big squad, it's difficult for you to deal with all the individuals. So that's when you look at your leaders, your captains, co-captains, senior players, and work alongside them with the assistant coaches, and spread that workload, where you can really identify where the players need help, and get the players to identify it as well. I mean, obviously, sometimes looking at videos, you can see a player will always bounce on the right and never the left, and you need to say, right, you need to go away and work on that left bounce. So yeah, it's just really identifying them small margins.
So Rob, you're almost sharing there of, if we looked at the specifics of, I'm coaching a lot of people, you're almost making it clear to coaches, look, you can't do it all yourself. Cultivate that rule of two. Who are those leaders? Give them the right skills so they're not just shouting at the other players, to enhance what they're doing. Is that, for some coaches, is that kind of a bit daunting for them to go, you want me to cultivate players to do my job, or do they get it?
Yeah, some coaches struggle with it, because obviously, some coaches have a lot of athletes turn up at a training session and just don't know what to do with that amount of athletes.
Yeah.
So that's when I've started talking about, breaking it down and using skill zones, rather than just using everybody on the court. If you recognise that certain players need help, just leaving your players who you're confident with to get on with what they're doing, and then you going into a little skill zone and working on one-to-ones or working with little groups, and then bringing them back into the main group, so they're ready to, you'll feel like they're achieving.
Guys, we've got about 5 minutes left here. Can I bring us back to some of the on-court communication that we were describing earlier? Maybe double click on that a little bit more. We obviously went through the rule of three, but Mark touched there on helping athletes to understand how to communicate with each other. So we just implement the rule of three and encourage them to talk to each other and solve problems, but we don't give them any kind of guardrails on how to communicate with each other. We can run the risk of some personalities overtaking the group, or some people unwittingly causing offense to others in the way that they communicate. So how have you helped athletes to understand how to both give and receive communication in those pressure moments?
Rob, can I add to that same question? Because I know that was an area you really worked on, is that how do you get the players that say nothing and the players that are always talking, those players are always talking, to help the silent players to share an opinion? I think you mentioned it slightly at the beginning of speaking, but I think that would be an added texture to Simon's question.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's getting the players to really engage.
Because you mentioned, Rob, didn't you? Remember on that when you mentioned earlier about when you're doing the timeouts, the coach doesn't just jump in. You're encouraging players to go, you speak to that player. What do you need from them? I think that was a critical part of that development of, you need me, I need to speak to that player. Yeah, share with them what you need.
Well, we talk. Another thing we work with Mark about is like interventions and hot reviews. So again, it's when things are live and the players are, at the height of intensity, it's stepping in then and getting that communication when when they're really active and the brain's thinking. We used to encourage our players after they finished the session, while there's doing the cool down, a stretch, then the captains would talk to the players and get a hot review and get all the information off the players at that point. So when they actually come into the coaches, then the captains could feed into the coaches already, what the players was feeling after an intensity of a hard game. So that was a good way of getting communication. Then another way we'd set up WhatsApp groups again, or just groups, and ask the players certain questions, for feedback, and they would give them an hour, so they could reflect and then get it onto the WhatsApp group, and then everybody could again see what players was thinking. So all part of that communication. So hot interventions where you get the communication when players are all fired up, and then when the players have gone away, and then start reflecting on things, and then put it in the WhatsApp group. So lots of ways of getting different feedback from your players to understand the best ways of communication.
And if I add, Simon, to what they were doing there, just for the listeners of that texture point, is what they were making sure that if they, after a session when they were giving feedback through and the leaders were getting, okay, so what are you thinking, reflecting it back, sharing it with the coaches, that WhatsApp when the players were starting to share, okay, this is what I'm struggling with, or I need a bit more of this, or this is what I'm seeing, the coaches made sure they collated that and it was impacting then the next session. So they were linking this review and the reflections, and I know also the coach would go, right, we're spotting something here as a trend, and they started to chuck little video clips in that helped them think about that problem solving. So by the time they got back on the court, they may have done 5 or 6 of these little solution finding on little video clips that helped them understand when they got back. So it was how they used that information to enhance the next session, and never thought of a session separate. They connected them. Would that be fair, Rob, in that the texture of how they fitted?
Yeah, very much so. It was an ongoing process that we all bought into, and yeah, and especially when you've got a big event coming up like a Paralympics or a Worlds, then you see a lot of each other. We're having regular camps, so this connection comes in even closer.
So last question for me, Mark, if I remember correctly, you've got the 3 A's, of communication, which I interpret as largely how to receive communication. So accept, acknowledge, action, I think it is. What do you do on the flip side? What are your 3 A's or your 3 somethings about giving that communication?
In essence, the simplicity is put a name on it first, not afterwards, and be solution based. So if you're sharing something that is giving them some actions of solution or positive reinforcement, do that again. That's awesome. You're killing them, whatever it might be, words to that effect. Then that's if you're giving it, that's what it has to be. What's unacceptable is it's problem based. Oh, you didn't do this, or that's not working. So always think about the communication needs to be solution based. It's going to enhance that athlete. Don't tell them what they already know they're doing wrong. That would be unacceptable. So that would be the sharing of, and then obviously the receiving is take it, even if you don't like it's being said, because they're under pressure. Is it solution based? Yes. Do I understand it? Yes. I'm off. Is it solution based? Yes. Do I not understand it? Okay, let me seek understanding in practice and make sure in competition we're using a language we've tested under pressure in practice, so there isn't any new crazy words or things being said.
Yeah. That's I can imagine that's quite a tricky thing for coaches to implement when you're trying to put in the rule of 3 around the first rule, peer-to-peer. Okay, 3 A's. How to receive communication, but if you put that in before the how to give communication, then you're asking people to accept some inappropriate or irrelevant communication, like communication that isn't solution based and that they don't understand. So I'm just wondering what order in which if you had a team tomorrow and you were going to implement that, what order would you use?
Well, if we're just looking at every team, 3 A's of basics. The principle of then you as a coach using the action review process to spot who's sharing correct information, who's not, and then start doing your little hot one-to-one interventions. Strangely, if we go back to Rob and the coaches, because of the lockdown, and they were forced to do the Zooms, actually, during that time, they got people to better understand what to say to others and help understand each other's challenges and problems and solutions before they got onto the court. So if you're not doing that, it's a process of be patient with it. Take time. Don't expect all at once. But the rule of 3 basics we look at, then we baseline it and go, how are we doing with that? Because some might be all over it straight away and go, this is great, you give me permission to share, and we just say it's solution based. Then we start scanning baseline of, right, who's struggling, who's not, and then you start putting in little interventions. But like we said before, you always set up what is success for the session, and then you review back to that, so they're not chucking 300 bits of data and the guy's going like, well, what's that got to do with the session? So strip it back, take time, start with the basics.
Well, I think that's a great concept for us to finish on. Rob, is there anything you want to share before we finish?
No, I was going to say it is challenging as a coach to give your authority away, because you feel as a coach that you've got to give the answers all the time.
Yeah.
So letting that go and letting the athletes give the answers, it's rewarding, but I say it does take some getting used to.
Yeah, that's one for the notebook, Rob.
Yeah,
giving your authority away. That's much easier said than done, isn't it?
It is.
Giving permission.
Giving permission. Yeah.
You're still in charge, but you've just given them permission, which you can take back if you feel appropriate.
Yeah. Well, listeners, coaches, if you want to reach out to Robin, jump on LinkedIn. He's Robin Tarr on LinkedIn. You'll find a lot of his content there, and also feel free to get in touch with him. For Mark and myself, get in touch with us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Or Instagram. You can find us as well. We love your questions. We had another question in on video during the week, which we're going to pick up on hopefully in the next couple of episodes. So if there's anything you want us to cover, any topics that you want us to double click on, comment on YouTube or send us a DM or get in touch on social media, and we'd be very happy to take it up. Well, Mark, thanks for joining us. And Rob, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate your different perspective on coaching and the benefit of your experience. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for the invite. It's been
Thank you, Rob. And anybody that hasn't seen wheelchair rugby, get on YouTube, watch it. It is amazing to see.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, guys.